Hello, podcast family, and welcome to Regulation Revolution, where we are igniting a revolution to help the world effectively manage and respond to their emotional experiences. It's not about what happens to us, but how we react that creates harmony or chaos in our lives. Emotional regulation is a complex process involving many factors. We offer this podcast to provide insight for you about how you fine-tune and powerfully decide to transform your complex emotional states into empowered instances of self-mastery, peace, and increased awareness. Instead of having your emotions control you, you can learn to have control over your emotions. The following program in no way constitutes therapeutic counseling and does not establish a therapeutic relationship or offer any premise of confidentiality with any listener or participant. For more information, visit us at regulationrevolution.com. Welcome to today's episode of Regulation Revolution with your co-hosts Amy Reamer and Barry Vassar, Heart and Mind. Amy is a licensed therapist, professional speaker, and teacher. Barry is a pre-licensed therapist and practice manager at Heart and Mind. To find out more about Heart and Mind, please visit heartmindrva.com. This is Barry Vassar. I am here with Amy Reamer. Thank you for joining us. We want to kind of pick up and talk about the tiger. We did an episode called Meeting Your Tiger. Amy has a cute little tiger right there. The one we're going to talk about today is not necessarily a cute little tiger. This is our fire tiger. So if you haven't had the chance to review the tiger episode, check that out. And this is going to kind of get into the different types. But for today, we're going to be looking at the fire tiger. Amy, tell me, is this a fire-breathing tiger? What is the fire tiger?
All right. So we talk about our nervous system. So we're in a good place and we're like at the top of the ladder. But then when something happens and we get a little stressed, get a little bit anxious or angry, then we've slipped down the ladder into sympathetic. And so I have generally referred to sympathetic as our tiger, but here recently we've been talking about the difference between sympathetic and dorsal. And we've talked about how sympathetic is like our fire tiger. So the fire tiger has life. It still wants to fix things and wants to make things better. It wants to fight back. And so it's got energy. It's got motivation. It's the I can mode that we're in. And then if we slip into dorsal, that's the I can't, and they're, shut down, and that's more the ice tiger. So today we're going to talk not just about the fire tiger, but also the physical and medical implications of what it looks like in our body if the fire tiger is kind of our home away from home that we sit in most of the time. For someone who's chronically stressed, chronically in sympathetic, and then the fire tiger mode, over time, that's not good for our body, and it will cause problems. So we wanted to maybe give people a little window into what that looks like.
And I tell folks often when I'm talking with them that when we're talking about that sympathetic nervous system, when we're talking about the fire tiger, that is what it's most commonly known as, the fight or flight. And I always use the example with animals and such like that. I'm like, it doesn't take much to figure out that when the deer hears the stick crack in the woods, ears perk up, nose starts sniffing, and then they usually take off running. There is the flight. They've sensed some sort of threat, whatever it may be. And I know on one model that we looked at, it talked about flight is just basically movement away. It's when we're in a panic, when we're in a fear, when we're experiencing anxiety, all of those different things. Those kind of prompt us into the flight mode, which that's part of the fire tiger. Because a lot of times when I'm talking to folks about the tiger being out, there is such a great imagery. They think the tiger's on attack, right? They're, oh, tiger's out, tiger's on attack. And I'm like, no, all we're talking about is you're activated. Mm-hmm. You're motivated to do something. It might be fight. It might be flee. Mm-hmm. And I also get a little pushback on why do they call it the sympathetic nervous system?
I know.
Doesn't sound like it's very sympathetic. Sounds very
Yeah.
aggressive.
That's why most people never can remember the difference. And
Mhm.
plus, parasympathetic has the two branches. So you have the ventral and the dorsal. So, and they're very, very different, but they're
Mhm.
driven by that same system. So that medical terminology doesn't always sort of like translate, I think, into real life so much. Um, and we do talk about what the fire tiger looks like on the outside, right? When someone's irritable or defensive, or
Mhm.
like you said, they're panicking, or maybe they're withdrawing or hiding or running away or shutting down a little bit, like, no, I don't want to talk about it, and they flee
Mhm.
from the situation. So we've obviously lots of our episodes, like with regulation, we're talking about the emotional side of it or what it looks like on the outside. And
Mhm.
so today we're going to talk about what's actually going on the inside of the body because of our nervous system being in that state, and then what that looks like when you go to the doctor. Um, and
A lot of
I'll throw a quick resource that I didn't think about earlier. But if you are familiar with Doctor oh no, okay, now my brain's gonna go do brain fart. I'll find it and I'll come back. Um, but we're gonna talk about the medical and physical implications of what happens when our fire tiger is our home away from home.
is that the body keeps the score?
No, that's Bessel van der Kolk, and he might mention it in the book. I can't remember. I have read it. It's Nicole Burke Harris, I think. Am I getting her name right? Like, hang on.
Well,
She,
while you're looking that up, I was gonna share with some
yes,
folks.
that's it. Nicole Burke Harris. Um, she's a pediatrician and doctor, and was the first Surgeon General of California.
Okay.
And has written a book, and her whole point is helping people to understand how stress and trauma impacts us physically, and how it puts us at more risk for medical issues, heart disease, cancers, all of that. It's basically what how toxic stress is. I'm sorry, it's not Nicole, it's Nadine. I knew that didn't sound right. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. I apologize. There is actually another Nicole Burke Harris out there that does, but it's Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. And she has a book, and there's a YouTube video, TED Talk on YouTube that she does that's fantastic. So that I would say, if you want to dive into this more, then go look up Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. Um, so anyway, coming back to like what's going on in our body. So today we're going to talk about kind of the fire tiger. So when we're in sympathetic, what does that look like physically? When I've trained therapists, I'm like, you can find out what your client's home away from home is just by talking to them a little bit about some of their physical medical stuff. Or if you get that in your intake, pay attention to the answers, because that can let you know if you have a client who's in fire tiger most of the time, that's their go-to when they're stressed, or are they an ice tiger person? Uh,
Gotcha.
so today we're going to talk kind of about the fire tiger and what that looks like in the body.
So if I threw out physical symptoms to you, land of make believe, you'd be able to tell me pretty much. All right. So if I looked at you and said, "Hey, Amy, I'm your new client, and some of my physical problems are I've got high blood pressure. That's one of the things the doctors are getting at me over. If I say uh, maybe I have a hard time with my oxygen circulating, different things like that. You could tell me, whether I was okay. So
So
explain that a little bit
yes,
more.
so certain things, when you're in sympathetic, when you're in fire tiger, the fire tiger causes certain parts of your body things to increase and other things to decrease. So if we go back to, I always kind of go back to my like third grade biology lesson about the saber-tooth tiger jumping out, and you don't digest your food because if you need to get away from them, right? You don't need to digest right now. You don't need to do higher math if you need to survive, right?
Right.
So certain things in your body, this is all driven from survival. So I know I have a Bruce Perry quote that talks about the brain's literal job is to keep you alive.
Right.
That's it. And that's what everything is geared towards. So if you have something that has sent you into fight flight, there's something that's a threat. And so certain things increase. So like you mentioned, high blood pressure increases, heart rate increases, adrenaline in your system has increased. And we know everybody talks about the impacts of cortisol and stress on the body. Your oxygen circulation goes to your vital organs. So just like we know, unfortunately, people can still survive with if a limb gets amputated, right? They're not, it's not a vital organ. It's nice to have, and we certainly want those things. And I know it's got to be difficult for folks who have lost a limb. However, one of the reasons that when we're in survival, all the blood goes to your vital organs to protect them. Because if a limb comes off in whatever, then the vital organs are going to be protected, and the things that aren't as vital aren't. Blood clotting actually increases. So you're more at a high risk of a blood clot if you're in sympathetic a lot. Pupil size. So pupils dilate, and so they get bigger. So most people know that pupils go bigger and smaller based on the amount of light, right? If it's a low light, pupils get bigger to try to let in more light. If it's a bright, day with bright sun or lights overhead, pupils get smaller because you don't need as much light. But if someone's in sympathetic, those pupils will dilate. So if someone is sitting in a room with you and it's a really well lit room and their pupils go big, then they may be feeling anxious or upset, or something has happened that sent them into sympathetic. And that might be your only clue that that's happened. And I've had that with some of my clients in the therapy room, that I can see when that happens. And so they don't feel like necessarily they're in tiger mode, but their pupils have blown open. And yeah, they can still be sensitive to light because they're in that situation.
Right. This is going to be
those are the things that kind of go up when you're when you're in that fire.
This is an unusual one for you. I had somebody that was sharing with me that whenever they get ready to get into a confrontation, so this is not identifying anybody, but picture your law enforcement, firefighter, EMT, or even a school teacher, that, forgive me for saying it, they stress poop. Now, is that related? Like, because I do, when I talk to folks, and somehow the bowels get involved, because I'll have folks tell me I have a hard time. Let's just say we're adults here. Constipation. Some people are going to the bathroom 2 and 3 times a day. Isn't that related?
Yes. Yeah, that's actually on the decreased side. So when you're in sympathetic, your digestion decreases. So everything stops. So constipation would be like, so if you have a checklist for, if you're a therapist or a doctor, whoever, like if you've got this checklist for medical issues, if someone has a history of constipation, there is a possibility that their nervous system has been in the fire tiger mode most of the time. And so, yes, it slows down, because again, you don't want to actually be having to stop to do that if you need to run away from something, right? If you need to fight something, you don't want to need to do that. Immune response goes down. So if someone gets sick a lot, if they have an immune system that just doesn't seem to knock anything out, they catch everything that comes down the pike, you may be in fire tiger mode. We're going to get back into our whole, you might be dysregulated if, right? It could be in fire tiger mode. Fuel storage decreases. So you may end up actually like losing weight because you're not storing the fuel, because it's going to use the fuel for fighting or fleeing, right? Like that's what you're going to use your energy for. People talk about like carbs, right? Like when you eat carbs, they like give you that energy, but you just kind of burn that off, right? Salivation decreases. So dry mouth. Everybody ever notice, like if you get upset about something or you're angry or you're anxious, you can't swallow or your mouth is dry because salivation decreases. And then obviously our relational ability decreases because we're, anxious. We don't want to necessarily engage with someone. We might be a little bit scared of people, what's going on. And so we're not going to be able to relate with people as much. Um, so, so that's, let me see. I had one other little thing here with my list. Breathing is fast and shallow. In the gut becoming inactive, like I said, that is to conserve energy, but it does affect your digestion. Yeah. So you're expending energy because it takes a lot of energy to be anxious or angry. So on the outside, flight might look like panic, fear, anxiety, worry, concern. Fight means rage, anger, irritation, frustration, right? So that's what it'll look like on the outside. But these are the things that are probably going on the inside. And I know some therapists actually that will use heart monitors. So when they're couples therapy, if their heart rate jumps too much, everybody takes a break because we're in sympathetic, we're in fire tiger mode, we're not going to get a whole lot done. It's hard to be relational. It's hard to understand others when we're in this space. So so that's what fire tiger mode looks like. So for people who and I'll give you a personal example. I actually used to run a low blood pressure. And so here's my funny story and I won't name the family member. But a family member was surprised to hear that I had a low blood pressure because I'm a heavier person. So they were and said, "Well, I thought someone of your stature would normally have high blood pressure." And so the reason that I had low blood pressure is because my home away from home used to be dorsal vagal. And so I've come out of dorsal and most of the time now, and don't go back there as much as I used to, but the fire tiger is still around. And so I actually have high blood pressure now. So that's a clue of where someone's nervous system is at, regardless of their body weight or their history or whatever.
So putting it out there, obviously we're not medical professionals. We can't give medical advice or anything else.
Right.
But is it a fair statement, I would say, clinically speaking, psychologically speaking, that a lot of the physical ailments or some of the physical ailments that we suffer from may actually just be nervous system issues?
Yeah. Or exacerbating it, right? Making it worse.
So you could go to the doctor. And I want to keep us on topic, but you could go to the doctor and you could be dieting, you could be losing weight, you could be taking your blood pressure medicine. If you've still got high blood pressure, and they'll say to you, well, it's inherited. It might not be inherited. You might need to be looking at not just your lifestyle, but maybe emotionally and psychologically where you're at. Or if you're taking something for your irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and it's supposed to be working and it's not working, then it might not be medical. It could be the nervous system. It could be psychological. So I think I just wanted to put that out there because I know a lot of folks that are outside of the counseling realm. They don't go to counselors, and they're not seeing a psychologist or anybody else, but they have physical ailments that they're getting treatment for, and they're not getting better. Right. So that might be your clue then. You might be dysregulated if that migraine medicine is not getting rid of your migraine.
Yeah. And there's research being done around IBS that it is when you're going in and out of fire and ice, so back and forth. So you're talking about folks with when there's a stressor or whatever. So if someone actually is eliminating like that or comes on quickly, it might actually be that they went into dorsal because dorsal actually expels, because dorsal is the I'm about to die. And so you're going to get rid of everything.
Okay.
However, things move better when we're in ventral, right? Everything moves the way it's supposed to move. Mm-hmm. So I joke about, because with play therapy, the kids fart in play therapy all the time, or they end up having to go and have a bowel movement before the session is over. Because if they've been in sympathetic and everything is shut down, and now someone's listening to them, hearing them, they're expressing themselves, they're feeling heard, they're co-regulating, right? Either with the therapist or with the parent or whatever's going on in the room. Their system now can move. So this is why a lot of times we have a stinky playroom. You know, and so it happens. And I tell the parents because they get all embarrassed, when that happens to their child. And I'm like, this is a good thing. Like, this is a sign like that their system is moving again when it was all locked up tight, right? So obviously we want our bodies to work the way they're meant to work, so it moving doesn't necessarily mean you're in dorsal, but dorsal would be more like diarrhea. Like, so if you're going constipation, diarrhea, it is likely that your nervous system is not getting, because ventral is where things work the way they're supposed to. Gotcha. And things move the way they're supposed to. And so if you're there, then things are going to move the way they should.
And for our listeners and viewers, I've got to put this one out here. Right before we started this podcast today, as I was talking with Amy, I was like, we're going to avoid talking about the poop. And I swear it didn't take 5 minutes, because it's the number one thing, believe it or not, that I hear from people is about what's going on in their gut. That's where all the nerve endings come together, gut instinct and everything else. And I did have an individual that is in one of those first responder type things. It explained to me, said the reason that the stress thing happens, he does his release, he put it in a different way to me. He said, if you're a tiger or if you're an animal out there hunting, you don't do it on a full stomach. You're getting ready to chase something that can run 60 miles an hour. And he says, so when you're getting ready to run into a burning building, or you're getting ready to go into a high impact volatile situation in law enforcement, or if you're getting ready to go on stage before 1,000 people, he said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. He said, that's activated too. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about it that way, because I had always associated with the dorsal piece of things and everything else. Mm-hmm. But I think what you're bringing up with this, folks, wait till you hear about the ice tiger. But so with this, how do so we got a fire tiger, right? We've got our bodies having these physiological reactions to basically psychological and neurological conditions. That's all the big words I'm going to use. How do we tame that tiger a little bit? I mean, what's something that can be done in there? Because we've got what the physical signs look like on the inside. We've talked about before what it might look like on the outside, but how do we sort of tone that down? Is there a way of doing that to tame that part tiger, just the fire tiger?
Well, basically you have to figure out how you get yourself back to ventral. How do you get back to safety? Mm-hmm. And so that's regulation. Then how do you regulate? Is that co-regulation with someone else? Is that regulate with music? Is that, do you withdraw from people for a little bit and get a little bit of quiet time? Do you need to go into dorsal to rest and digest? I mean, they talk about the rest and digest, right? Like, that's what dorsal is. And so do you need that? Do you give yourself permission to do that? Like, we're a society that really pushes, us to perform and work and things like that. So do you give yourself permission to enjoy and settle? And, I actually started so I use Alexa for like my alarms and waking up and going to bed and turning our light on in the bedroom and all that good stuff. And when I tell her good night, it's got a routine where it turns the light out, gives me the weather, and plays ocean sounds for 45 minutes. But I added a routine in there where she tells me a joke before going to bed. And they're usually like really dumb kind of dad joke type of things. Uh-huh. But I did that specifically because obviously laughing is good for us, right? Like it releases, stress and helps with regulation. So I was like, what better way like to get yourself prepared to go to sleep, but to have like a little laugh, right?
Right.
So no matter, get your mind off of your day or your stress. Another answer to that question, the only part sort of our body that we really, or the way that we can access our nervous system is breathing. And so That's why people talk about taking deep breaths or slowing your breathing down. My oldest son and my daughter-in-law do such a great job with my grandkids when they get really upset. And, they're like, breathe with me, like, just take a breath, like they co-regulate. They actually, I mean, I could see them with their bodies. Like they're like going slow and they're breathing with them, like let's take a breath. And like, they're getting them to calm down when they're kind of in that space. And so, that's the part of your nervous system you can actually access, that you can make a little bit of change to. You can hold your breath, sure, but when you pass out, you're going to start breathing again. That's autonomic nervous system, right? You can't necessarily slow your heart down or make your heart beat faster unless you do certain things. Like if you think about, like if I do if I listen to ocean sounds, then my heart rate's probably going to go down and all that, but I'm not physically telling my heart to slow down.
Right.
So breathing obviously is a big thing that you could, kind of try to slow your breathing down. If you recognize you're breathing really shallow and fast, you're probably in sympathetic. So it's like, you can take a second and try to slow it down, and, and you can do that. Yeah. That's one of the other ways, but it's getting back to that's individual. So you got to figure out what works for you.
One of the things that, don't want to put it out there as end all be all, but I have known folks, and this is something that people need to consider as well. I do think that it is a particular set of circumstances, particular relationship, a particular work environment that is keeping them in that chronic state, in that sympathetic nervous system with fire going. And I have seen people, which this is something that, folks listening and watching, that you might want to consider in life. If you're staying in that state, it might not hurt to look at the relationships you have, look at the work environment you're in, because I have known people that have stepped out of a work environment that they thought they loved, and all of a sudden they've dropped 20, 30 pounds, their blood pressure's fine, everything's regular in the system. So sometimes it's depending on the intensity I've seen people in relationships do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's not saying everybody go home and get rid of your relationships and everybody quit your job. But is there some truth in the idea that sometimes we just can't regulate it in the circumstance we're in? If you're a deer during hunting season, every snap of the twig, every smell of smoke, every sound, you are in an environment where no matter how many times you try to lay down, you're always on high alert. Mm-hmm. You take a look at a deer that's not in that situation. You go to a sanctuary, you go to a zoo or something like that, deer are coming up to the fence to see people. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes is it possible that we can't regulate ourselves unless we remove ourselves from the situation?
Yeah. Or you have to figure out how to get yourself back to ventral. So if you have like that really stressful job and you can't necessarily get another job, but how do you get rid of that stress of the day, right? Like when the job is over for the day, are you basically carrying it with you the rest of the day? Mm-hmm. And so I also wanted to make another point, because I guarantee you that there are people out there that know somebody who physically seems to be in fantastic shape. The people who run and jog or lift weights, or, that they just seem to be physically like in shape. And then they're the ones that have a heart attack before 50. And you're like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought that, Joe Blow would have had a heart attack, because he's in such great shape. And I'm not advocating to not exercise, because obviously exercise is good for you, but it's not necessarily going to fix everything. And so if you are completely stressed and chronically stressed, even if you're in good shape, you still are taxing your body. And so you have to do both, right? You have to deal with your physical health as well as your mental health, because your body is impacted by both.
And I do want to put out there for our folks, and maybe you can piggyback on this a little bit. I know we're getting down to the final few moments here, but the fire tiger, it's not a bad thing. We're talking about all the stuff that you can feel physically and such. And I'm just picking professions out there. If you're a stockbroker working Wall Street, you need to have your fire tiger out. You need to be watching the numbers. You need to be doing quick sales, and you need to be doing that for your 8-10 hour day. But then you need to know how to cut it off. if you're a firefighter, if you're working in an ER, even if you're a teacher responsible for small children, having that fire tiger, being a little bit on edge and being a little bit more alert, there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say, and I could be wrong on it, the problem is when the bell rings, when you clock out, that you stay in it the rest of the night. You need to be an 8 hour, have your fire tiger out, do it. But we need to know how to cut it off, because it's not really bad until it's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, because you're in a bad marriage, overworked at job and everything else, right?
Right. Yeah. It is about being able to come out of it. It's like coming up for air, right? Nobody can stay underwater but for so long
Right.
before they're going to start gasping and they're going to end up drowning. So you've got to come up for air on a regular basis.
Oh, I like that. I like that analogy, because there's nothing wrong. Here's my little takeaway. There's nothing wrong with holding your breath and swimming underwater, but you got to know when to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what we need to do with our tiger. We're going to look at the ice tiger. That'll be in a coming up episode. I want to remind our folks to follow us on YouTube, on Spotify at Regulation Revolution. You can follow us on Facebook. You can go to our Regulation Revolution website. You can sign up for our newsletter. Once again, if you've got questions, you got comments, you got an opinion, you got a criticism, we like praise better. But if you got any of that, you send that to.
We are at the end, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. You guys have a nice day.
Following program includes stories and situations that are not intended to identify any client or individual. Any similarities are coincidental and should not be considered reflective of any one person or group of people. The preceding program in no way constitutes therapeutic counseling and does not establish a therapeutic relationship or offer any premise of confidentiality with any listener or participant. If you or someone you know is in need of counseling services and reside in the Commonwealth of Virginia, please visit us at heartmindrva.com for more information.